I've been writing this book for a number of years. And so much has been in my head, and I've reworked this manuscript so many times. And finally got it sold last year, finished the book, got it sold. And so it's such a pleasure for these last couple of months, the book came out on December 23rd, to actually get out in the world and start talking about a subject that I've been so passionate about for so long. I thought what I would do is just talk a little bit about how I even stumbled onto this topic of receiving, because if you're like I was, we think a lot about giving, certainly as we should, and we should be taught to give, but not really that much about receiving. And so even 20 years ago, I was a social worker, I was a counselor, and I was really hearing from so many people their frustration that they were giving and giving and giving and giving and doing for others who were not giving back to them, or certainly not in any equal measure. And people felt frustrated and resentful. And they would say, Amanda, when is it going to be my turn? Or how can I get the people I care about and the people that I'm giving to, whom I am giving to, how can I get them to be more giving to me? And as I thought about that, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was just thinking about, well, I want to find a way to help my clients solve this problem about kind of the lack of reciprocity that was going on in their relationship. But as I started to think about receiving, I thought, I don't really know exactly what receiving is. And even though every giver has a recipient of that giving, right? There's a receiver for every giver. I thought, why do we never hear about the receiver? Why is it only about the giver? We can't all be givers all the time, because of course it's natural to both give and receive. And so this started me thinking about what a definition even of receiving was. I thought if I have to help, if I want to help my clients, then I need to know exactly how I can teach them how to receive. Now, I've since learned that the definition of receiving is simply to accept willingly. So I think it's a nice, easy, simple definition, actually, for receiving. But as I was looking at the topic of receiving, I thought, is receiving a passive state? Is it a dynamic state? Can it be active? Can you even teach people how to receive? I thought if you just want to receive and sit around and wait for someone to give to you, I thought progress could be glacial, because certainly for myself back then and for many people, I had very successfully turned away people trying to give to me. As a social worker in the helping fields especially, I was used to not only helping people and giving in my professional life, but that carried very much over into my personal life. So when people would ask if they could do something for me, I was one of those people who would say, no, don't worry about me. No, you go ahead. I can handle it. It's okay. And so I was very much pushing away any offers that came my way. So that truly, by the time I decided to investigate this topic, nobody was banging down my door at that time trying to give to me. So I thought I have to think of a way that I can teach myself and others to receive that is not just about passively waiting around. The other thing that I realized was that unless my subconscious was on board that receiving was a good idea, that I wouldn't be able to receive. I could consciously want people to give to me and have reciprocity in my relationships all I wanted. But the fact is, I knew I would sabotage that. So I thought, how can I get my subconscious to get on board with this receive idea? And as I was thinking about this, I read this little story about some monks, some Buddhist monks in the Himalayas, training for their own evolution for decades. And at the end of this little story, these monks were asked to go down into the street and beg for alms. And that was the end of the story. And I thought about that. And back then, I didn't even know this was common in Buddhist cultures. I was very unfamiliar with this. And I thought about this story, and I thought, you know, in this country, when we see someone who is begging, or someone homeless, or someone destitute, we turn our eyes away. You know, there's a lot of shame associated with being in this kind of situation in our country. It's certainly not a spiritual practice at all. And I thought it's interesting that these monks are doing this, and I thought certainly you'd have to put your ego to the side to do an act like that. And I thought you're giving the gift to somebody else of giving to you, which is a very generous thing actually to do. And the more I thought about it, I thought this is really a very spiritual act to beg for alms, to give somebody the opportunity to give to you, but even more so, it's such a beautiful expression of one's own humanity, of the idea that we are all one, or we all are in this together, and that when we can give and receive, when we can help each other and receive help from each other, that this, at the end of the day, is really a beautiful spiritual expression. When I began to think of receiving as a spiritual act, for me at that point in my life was what I needed for my own subconscious to get on board. And so I thought, okay, so I have this first piece really in reframing receiving as a spiritual act, which goes against every single thing in our culture. Our culture, it is better to give than receive. It is more blessed to give, as if the receiver doesn't even exist. I mean, who's on the other end of this? You know, it's interesting. But so I thought I have this first part then as just for my own inquiry and my own way in to what receiving is. But I thought I need active steps that people can take and that I can do and that I can teach people to teach them how to receive. And so I started thinking, what are receptive states?